Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to help you understand what are the different types of funding instruments that you can use to raise money for your company. Now, you might have heard in the headlines that this company raised that much capital, that company raised so much capital, etc., etc. But what doesn't really get talked about generally, or even rather the general public doesn't know, is that for these amounts of funding, there is a specific instrument that each of these startups use to give to the investor. So essentially, it's basically like a transaction. Your investor puts in some amount of money, and in return of that money, they get something known as shares. Now, I'm going to divide this video into four different types of funding instruments. The number one types of instruments are equity-based instruments. The second types of instruments are debt-based instruments. The third type we are going to talk about are going to be grants, and the final fourth type are going to be alternative modes of investment. Now, let's first explore the first type of instruments, equity based investment. Now, the very first type of instrument is common equity shares. Like, let's suppose you are going to have a valuation of your company at 9 crore rupees, and then you pitch to an investor. They agree that they are going to put in 1 crore rupees. In this case, your equity share pool is of 9 crore rupees before the investment, but after the investor puts in their money, your effective total valuation of the company becomes 9 plus 1, which means 10 crore rupees, which effectively means that the investor now owns 10% of your company through the form of equity shares. Now, equity shares are an instrument wherein you have a little bit of control over the company. Whoever gets equity shares in a company typically has an ownership as well as voting rights onto the company. Which brings me to the next type of instrument, which is preference shares. Now, understanding preference shares and equity shares has a very minor subtle difference. Let's say there is going to be a liquidation event. What is a liquidation event? Let me explain that to you as well. Let's say tomorrow someone comes in and makes you a buyout offer that, hey, we want to buy your company out. Or let's say some other investor comes in and they say that we want to buy a certain stake into the company, but we want to buy someone else's stake. So let's assume that you own equity shares and the other set of investors, they own preference shares. So the people who are owning preference shares get higher preference in that liquidation event. This is the type of instrument that usually is being utilized when raising capital with equity. There is another type of instrument called as debentures. Now, what are debentures? Debentures are essentially these kind of instruments that are a loan onto your company, but you don't particularly have to pay any sort of interest on that loan. It is a kind of loan effectively that you, in a way, don't really have to return. Okay, it's a very crude understanding of that, but it gets the messaging across. So, how does a debenture work? So, debentures, as I mentioned, are treated as a loan on the company. They carry a very nominal interest rate on them, which is 0.0001% or so, whatever agreed upon in the agreement. But the nature of this instrument is that it is treated as a loan for a certain amount of time, and after that time has lapsed, it gets converted into either equity or preference shares. So the nature of a debenture is that, let's say, for example, you are raising 10 lakh rupees as a debenture and your company's valuation is unclear. Typically, this type of instrument is raised when a startup is unclear on how should they value themselves. Okay, and very common scenario, because some of the times there is no proper cash flow through which a valuation can be predicted. So what do startups say is that startups say that, okay, what we are going to do is we are going to define something known as a floor and a cap. What is a floor? Floor is the minimum amount of valuation that will be triggered, and cap is the highest amount of valuation that can be captured for that investment. So let's say, for example, as I mentioned, the example of 10 crore rupees. In case of a debenture, that valuation will not be defined. That debenture will come in as a loan on the books, and till the point of time a certain time has lapsed, or another investor comes in and they haven't put their money into the company, till that point of time the valuation of the company does not get decided. So how it works is, typically the floor is, as I mentioned, the lowest amount of valuation that your company will get. So let's assume you are you're raising 10 lakh rupees. Okay, now 10 lakh rupees, if you calculate on 1 crore, that is 10%, right? If you calculate it on 10 crore, that is 1%. So what you say is, we are going to raise a debenture at a 10 crore floor and a 20 crore cap, which means if this gets converted, the investor will either have 1% equity at a 10 lakh investment or a 0.5% equity at a 20 crore valuation. It will be fluctuating between this range, which means the amount of valuation will be either 1% ownership by the investor or 0.5% ownership. How this works is this is time defined. What the startup will tell to the investor is that if, let's say, we are not able to get a next round at a higher valuation, which means if we are not able to raise the next round at a valuation that is higher than 20 crores, or they are not able to raise capital at all in the next fixed amount of months, then that investment gets converted at the floor valuation, which means the investor will get 1% equity at 10 crore. These are just numbered assumptions. It will be different based on different types of instruments and cases. But if the startup is able to raise at a valuation that is higher than 20 crores, let's say the startup was able to raise at a valuation of 40 crores. In this case, the investor that has invested 10 lakh rupees right now will get a valuation that will get fixed at 20 crores, which means that whichever investor will come in at a 40 crore valuation will own lesser amount of company, lesser percentage of the company as the investor who had put in money right now at this debenture stage, which effectively gives the investor an added advantage. Another nature of debenture is that it carries forward a small discounting factor, which means whichever investor is going to come in, let's say you closed in at a next valuation of 15 crores, which is between 10 and 20, right? You raised in a valuation at 15 crores over here. So in this case, because it is not a floor, it is not above cap, all right? It is not below the floor, it is not above the cap, which means it is in the center. So at this stage, what happens is there comes a factor of discounting. So this discounting can be anything. It can be 10%, 15%, 20%, 30%, whatever gets decided. So effectively, let's say if 15 crore is the valuation and you gave in a discounting factor of 10%, which means that 1.5 crores will be negated from that 15 crores, which means 13.5 crores, which means the investor who put in 10 lakh rupees will get a valuation of 13.5 crores, whereas the other investor who came in later will get a valuation of 15 crores. Okay, so that's typically the nature of a debenture. And this is just these are just a few types of equity instruments. There are more other types of instruments as well, but these three are the most common ones. I spent a lot of time explaining what debentures are because it's just a little bit more of a complicated instrument in that sense. Then let's come to the next category of investment instruments, which is debt. Now, a lot of people get scared of hearing about debt. A lot of people are scared of loans. But in certain cases, it actually does make a lot of sense to get a loan instead of raising funding. Like, let's take, for instance, what are the cases wherein you will actually raise via loans? If your business is generating cash on a monthly basis, monthly recurring basis, and you know that you need only X amount of money to be able to scale up your operations, in that case, instead of giving away equity to an external investor, it is better to actually take a loan. And if you look at the biggest companies in the world, most of them actually have lots and lots of loans on them because it also becomes easier from a tax planning perspective. Obviously, because you've taken a loan, that can't be counted as your profit, so that kind of gets negated and it actually helps you with your tax planning as well. So it's also a very risky form of investment to raise as well, primarily because you're bound to pay EMIs, you're bound to have like certain interest rates that you need to take. But if your business is generating cash flows that are more than the EMI of that particular loan, then in that case, it is definitely a no-brainer choice. I mean, why would you give equity in your company when you know that your business is generating cash at a consistent basis that is significantly higher than the loan? Like, a simple thing for the simple calculation for this is, let's say, for example, your business is generating 10 lakhs a month and you require, let's say, 50 lakhs for expansion. Okay, and that 50 lakhs you are getting at an interest rate of, just assuming round figure, 10%. Okay, 10% per annum. So at a 10% interest rate, wherein you applied for a 50 lakh loan, and it is spanning across 24 months, your monthly EMI will come anywhere between the range of 2 to 2.3 lakh rupees or so, right? Now, in that case, just do some basic calculations. Are you able to generate enough amount of money for your business through your current endeavors, and are you able to service that EMI? Let's say, for example, you might have a revenue of 10 lakh rupees, okay, and your expenses are 6 lakh rupees. So when this amount comes into your account, you will have to pay another 2 lakh rupees. So since you're earning 10 lakh rupees, your expenses are 6 lakh rupees, and your EMI, when you're adding 2 lakh rupees on that, it's still 8 lakh rupees. So you're still being profitable, right? So what will that actually help you to achieve? Like, let's say, for example, you take that loan. Will it help you to get from 10 lakh rupees revenue to 20 lakh rupees revenue? If the answer is yes, if you're actually able to make sense of the numbers, then go ahead, go for that debt instrument instead of going for equity or preference shares. But of course, this, it's a very risky type of fundraising instrument, primarily because in equity and CCPS or debentures, there's no liability on you as such. However, in case of loans, you will have to either keep collateral, something in the secured category, or if you raise via unsecured loans, then the interest rates are super high. They can be either 12%, 16%, whatever amount of money you're able to get, or whatever amount of percentage that is being quoted for you. So be a little bit careful when taking on loans. The third category of investment is grants. Now, there are so many schemes nowadays. There's Startup India, there's a lot of government-based grants that you can actually opt for. And these are actually pretty good instruments to go ahead and raise, because most of their terms are pretty friendly, pretty founder friendly. And grants are sometimes also given to startups without any collateral, without anything against it. If I were to talk about my industry, there is Epic Games, which is they are the developers of Fortnite, and they are the developers of this platform called Unreal Engine. So Epic Games does these Epic Games mega grant, wherein they offer 25,000 US dollars to 50,000 US dollars to startups or companies that are building some amazing games. So this is basically no strings attached, money given free of cost to the startups or game developers that are building something cool. You can look for such grants existing within your industry, or of course there are accelerators or incubators and government-based grants that you can get as a nominal amount of equity funding as well into your company. So grants are, out of all the options, one of the best ways to raise funds for your startup, because they, in most of the cases, don't carry any collateral and have pretty friendly terms to raise. And then the last category of investment fund instrument is alternative or unique or innovative types of instruments. These can include concepts like your crowdfunding, strategic partnerships, or joint ventures, wherein you will minimize the cost of development, something of that sort. But what I want to stress about over here is on the crowdfunding angle. Let's say you are able to come up with an exciting product and you want to validate it. One of the best ways of validation is by actually hosting a crowdfunding campaign. Is the product of or service that you're making actually required in the market? Are people willing to pay for it? So that's how you will be able to A, validate your idea, and B, get early buyers or supporters of your product or service. So crowdfunding is also a very, very good instrument of raising capital. In most of the crowdfunding cases, you don't really have to give anything back. You give a promise to people who back you, that saying that I'm going to make this so and so product at so and so date, and whenever it's ready, you will get early access, or you will get behind the scenes info and whatnot. Okay, so these are a couple of types of fundraising instruments. Let me know down in the comment section which of the instruments will you prefer to use to raise funds for your startup. And if you think that I have missed out anything, if you are also a founder that has raised in the past, do let me know in the comment section what are the other different types of fundraising instruments. So that's it for this video, guys. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you're finding my channel for the first time, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss out on my next videos. My name is Nikhil Malankar. I'm a game developer by profession, and on my YouTube channel, I make videos around games, game development, and entrepreneurship. So that's it for this video. I'll see you on my next one. Until then, take care.